Hey guys, Dan here with this week's TV news and reviews in a completely new location for the channel. We've never done a video here before. This is actually my parents' shore house. I'm at the shore for the week, but I still wanted to bring you a TV review video, so before the rest of my family gets here tonight, I figured I would sit down and go over some stuff with you about this week's TV. I originally had wanted to have these blinds open up, but it's way too bright outside still for that to happen. So this is the background that you get, but this is the lovely beach house, at least the kitchen part of it. There's a table behind me that I'm blocking, but anyway, so let's get it started here. We're gonna kind of rush through the news, just talk about the renewals, the cancellations, and the reboots, because there are some interesting things in all three of those. So first, let's talk about the renewals, because there's definitely some weird ones here. So first of all, I guess some of the more obvious ones. Rami is going to be coming back for season 3 on Hulu. That makes total sense. That was a big hit for the channel, and he was nominated for, I don't know if it was an Emmy or a Golden Globe, but he was nominated for Best Actor in a Comedy for maybe both of those. I don't know, but that's gotten some good ratings, and I really liked the episode that I saw of Rami. So that's coming back for season 3. Better Things is coming back for season 5 on FX. That's also not really a surprise. I have yet to see this show, actually, but my buddy Melissa that comes on the show, the channel here sometimes, and we review TV and stuff, she is a big fan of this show. So I know at some point I'm going to have to buckle down and just kind of binge through the seasons. But so that's getting a season 5 on FX. Legendary, which is on HBO Max, is now the second HBO Max original show to get a second season. Love Life was the first one. With Anna Kendrick was in the first season, but we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but they'll have a new woman starring in season 2. But Anna Kendrick will still be part of it. It will still be in the same world. But that's Love Life. Legendary is the reality show that I reviewed upon HBO Max's start. And I liked it. It had some issues, but overall, in terms of reality competitions, I thought it was pretty decent. I just think maybe it took itself a little too seriously. But that will be back for season 2 as well. Catfish. Season 9 is coming. I mean, I don't care about this show. I don't think I've ever seen an episode. Now, I saw the movie Catfish that it's based on, like 10 years ago, but this is going to be a virtual season. They're all sort of virtual because of the nature of catfishing, but I mean, this will be a remotely shot season. And I guess in the show, they typically go to the person's house and find out, oh, you're not who you say you were. You've been catfished. So I don't know how they're going to do it here, but season 8 just wrapped not long ago, and already August 5th we're going to see season 9 of Catfish. If you like that, I think it's rather stupid, but a lot of people are into that show. And then there's 2 that I was really kind of shocked by. One is The Crown. That is getting a season 6 on Netflix. Originally, way back when, it was scheduled for 6 seasons, but Netflix I don't know who decided, whether it was Netflix or the producers decided to cut it off at season 5 just a few months ago. And then I guess because of the stories that they wanted to tell in this final quote-unquote season, they decided, in agreement with Netflix, to extend it to a 6th and final season. So we're not going to get another storyline really in season 6. We're going to be in the same timeline as season 5, but they're just going to flesh out a lot of the stories they wanted to tell. So it will be a more complete version. I know they change the royals, I guess, every couple years or whatever. So season 5 and 6 will sort of be a joint effort in terms of timeline and storyline, just basically to extend it. And then the other one that's surprising, because I sort of, A, I forgot all about it, but B, it seemed like more of a one-off series of specials, and that is the Moody's on Fox. So they did a Moody's Christmas special, and it was really like a miniseries. It wasn't a special. I think it was a 4-episode, maybe it was just 3, but anyway, it was several hours long of a miniseries called The Moody's Christmas, and I reviewed it. And it was okay. I think I probably gave it like a C plus or something. It was all right. Dennis Leary stars in it, who I always enjoy. And I remember saying at the time that they maybe could work out different, from what I read about it, the producers were like, well, we could do different, series of this every year with different holidays. And that's not really what they're talking about with the renewal. They seemingly want to just make it a standard show, like a standard, not really sitcom because it wouldn't be in front of an audience, but or maybe it would. I don't know. Maybe they would change it, but it didn't seem to, from the news I read, revolve around any kind of holiday or anything. It's just sort of its own show. Which, look, The Simpsons started out with a Christmas special. Really, they started out with Tracy Ullman shorts, but the first episode of The Simpsons is technically the Christmas special, so it's not unheard of for Fox to do something like this. But I just thought it's interesting because I completely forgot this show even existed 6 months ago. So the Moody's is coming back, I guess, for a spring revival, since everything's sort of up in the air. But Fox has a fall schedule that's already set, and it's pretty corona-proof because it's a lot of like acquired properties and things that they've held over, like MasterChef Junior, that would have aired this summer. So if anything, it'll be on at the earliest in like January, February, like a lot of their shows. But Moody's coming back. So I never did make it through, actually, the whole miniseries. I think I only watched the first episode, as I do a lot of the time because it's hard to review full series of every show that's on. But all right, so then a couple of cancellations. Run on HBO, which I was actually just thinking about the other day. I really kind of liked that show. It's one of those that I think I gave it like a decent grade. It's like a B or B plus maybe. But the more I thought about it, I was like, man, I really want to go back and watch that show. It's only 7 episodes, and now I guess that will be the only 7 that exist. It's interesting that it got canceled because Phoebe Waller-Bridge was behind it, and of course she is an industry darling, so the ratings really just must not have been there for Run. And then the other canceled show, The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. This is weird because the CW just canceled Katie Keene last week, which is also part of the Archie Riverdale universe, and so is Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, of course. That is on Netflix, but they're going to end with the part 4 that they've already shot. So basically they do their seasons in parts, and they renewed parts 3 and 4 at the same time, and it's basically a 16-episode order. So it was 8 episodes for part 3, 8 episodes for part 2. So it's already been shot, it's already in the can. I don't know if it has a definitive conclusion or not, because obviously they probably didn't know they were getting canceled. So it might not. I've actually not seen this show, but I know people that really love it. It's got a good fan base, so I'm sure some people will be very upset that we're ending it after part 4 and possibly on a cliffhanger too. So let's talk then about the reboots. There's 2 to mention this week. The first is, actually, I'm really excited about both of them, but first is the more lower profile one. Jane Lynch, who, of course, hosts Hollywood Game Night for NBC, is on tap now to do a new game show for NBC, but it's really an old one. It's a reboot. She's going to do The Weakest Link in a 13-episode primetime series, probably airing next summer. That seems to be the big spot for game show-type programming. And I really loved The Weakest Link when it was first on. Listen, this whole primetime game show thing, it was big when I was like a little kid. Like they had summer, it was mostly in the summer. I remember they did a version of Monopoly, and they did like a couple other things like that. But it wasn't until Who Wants to Be a Millionaire that it really took off. And so now you have ABC doing all the retro games on their Sunday nights and Wednesday nights. Match Game, Press Your Luck, Card Sharks, with new versions, but it still looks and feels like the originals. But NBC had a big success with Deal or No Deal for a while, and now they do The Wall with Chris Hardwick, which I haven't seen. I know they brought that back for season 3 recently, and I haven't watched any of the episodes yet. But I'm always for game shows. Weakest Link was a fun one to watch. I liked even when they did the syndicated version with George Gray, I think was the host, which I actually got to see that live, that iteration of The Weakest Link. It was the first sort of TV show I ever saw filmed live, so that was kind of cool. But Anyhow, so Jane Lynch will be doing 13 episodes of that. But the really big reboot news, maybe you've heard about this, The Wonder Years is coming back to ABC, at least in a pilot. They, I think, have a commitment to air the pilot. Where it goes from there, I don't know. I don't know if they're going to take it to series or not. But listen, this is great news. The Wonder Years is one of my all-time favorite shows. If you ask me, like, certainly when I was a kid, if you asked me, like, what's top 10 of all time, Wonder Years would absolutely be in there. Probably not top 10 anymore, but I would say it's probably still in my top 25 maybe of all time. I mean, I grew up the same age as the Kevin Arnold character, so I really related to a lot of his stuff, even though it took place in the 60s. So here's the deal with the reboot. It still takes place in the 60s. It's going to be about a black family in in Alabama, which I think is going to be super interesting. Because look, the original never shied away from political issues of the time, racial issues of the time. The older sister, played by Olivia Dabo, she was a hippie, basically. I mean, it took place in the late 60s. She was a hippie girl and, flower child. And so there was a lot of tension between her and the dad. I think this will be very interesting. And Fred Savage, who, of course, played Kevin Arnold in the original, is going to direct the pilot. He has made a name for himself doing all of these sitcoms. Mostly, he directs Always Sunny in Philadelphia and a lot of different shows for, major networks. And so he's going to direct the pilot. And then Neil Marlins, who I guess co-created the original series, at the very least had a heavy hand in producing it, but I think he's one of the co-creators. He's going to be on as a consultant for the reboot as well. So totally, different family, different everything. I mean, I don't think there's going to be callbacks because the original did not take place in Alabama. I'm trying to remember where it was. It was definitely Middle America. Was it like Detroit, maybe? I can't remember exactly where the original took place, but I don't think it was Alabama. So it'll be interesting with the race relation stuff of the 60s to have a black family, sort of at the helm with that. So very, very interesting stuff. So that is the TV news for the week. Let's just dive right in to the series. And like I've been doing the last couple weeks, there just isn't that much new product out there because it's summer and because Corona shut down Hollywood. So we review 3 new shows, and then the big binge is how we end, which is a series that I just, I'm not much of a binger. Usually when I review shows on this show here, it's 1 or 2 episodes, even if they're all up on Netflix, even if like 10 hours are available. I just watch the first 1 or 2 because it's time consuming, but now that it's summer, now that seasons have wrapped up, for example, it's the perfect time to do a big binge. So this week we have one that I reviewed very, very highly upon its first episode back in September or October, and that is Emergence. But it has just been announced that is over. There is no season 2, at least not on ABC. They may bring it back somewhere else, but I haven't read that they're shopping it around. So my big binge is going to be Emergence coming up later. But first, let's get to the 3 new shows of the week. 2 of them are on Netflix, and the other one, surprise, surprise, is a competition show. We've been talking about every week. It seems like there's 1 or 2 new game shows, competition shows to talk about. Physical competition shows is what I mean, like Ultimate Tag and stuff. And this week we have another one called Cannonball. But first, let's talk about Netflix shows. Unsolved Mysteries. Speaking of reboots, we're going to start there. Now, I was never like a huge fan of the original, but I remember it being on. It was very prevalent. I feel like my brother liked it, so it's possible that I watched a few of them here or there when I was younger. And of course, that intro with Robert Stack is so classic. And so they have brought back Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix. I think there's only 6 episodes of the new version, either 6 or 8. Yeah, just 6. And I watched the first one called Mystery on the Rooftop, about this dude who seemingly had a great life and everything seemed nice, and he left for the day. Bye, honey. And then he is found dead. It's ruled a suicide, but then all these weird things keep popping up, these clues that make it pretty clear that it's not a suicide. So that was the first episode, anyway, the one I watched. And so, look, it's the same format as they've had for years. This is technically considered season 15 of Unsolved Mysteries, but really it's, reboot season 1. It's very highly rated on Netflix. People are loving it. It's, been in the top 10 now for a couple of weeks. And it was number 1 for a while on Netflix. This iteration has no host. There is sort of a silhouette of Robert Stack in the intro, but there's no host to it. So, you really get to kind of dive right into the story immediately. There's no setup, really. It's just sort of set up by, sort of a montage of like greatest hits from the episode you're about to see, to sort of set the stage. And, they get some good interviews. They have interesting people on. Something I've always sort of appreciated about Unsolved Mysteries as opposed to certain other shows. Just, again, this is very, like, ancillary information. I didn't really watch a lot of it growing up. But from what I remembered, they kept the stories compelling and they kept them moving. Like a lot of things, like I feel like Dateline is a great example. Dateline's a fun show, to watch if you want to, laugh at the, To Catch a Predator, or, oh, she definitely killed her husband, whatever. Maybe laugh at isn't the right term, but it's like, it's so by the numbers every week on Dateline. But the thing about it is, it's like they recycle a lot of the same types of things. They have like one or two pictures of the person that they're talking about, so they keep showing them. And SNL did a bit about it, and it's so true. But this, because of the scope of people that they have talking about, like they have a news reporter that covered it, they talked to some of the investigators, they talked to a lot of the family members, they talked to so many different people about what happened, and they do a couple of the things where it's like, and then his glasses weren't broken even though he fell from that rooftop, and then they show a stock video of like a pair of glasses falling to the ground in slow motion. Okay, they always do that kind of stuff in this type of show, so I can't grade it too harshly for that, but I do think it's a little annoying. But anyway, the interview stuff they have is great, and they don't do a lot of that like stock footage type stuff. Certainly less than in most shows. But I think they choose compelling things to talk about. I'm not a huge like real crime person. I find when I watch them, I am interested, but I don't know, sometimes I just get too invested and it like bums me out, and it makes me kind of like lethargic, because I feel bad for these people. So here I don't know what it is about Unsolved Mysteries. It's so enticing. I guess it is really the unsolved part, because things on like Dateline, you just know for 45 minutes they're just leading up to the husband did it, or the wife did it, or whoever. Here, since it's unsolved, you really don't know who did it. They present you the different pieces. They clearly have an angle. Like here, they want us to really know for sure that, okay, this guy didn't kill himself like the cop said. But what did happen? We don't know, and we may never know. And these poor people that have to deal with that. But I think that does make it a little more intriguing. I think that's what makes Unsolved Mysteries such a compelling show, as opposed to a lot of the other things like 2020 and Dateline and stuff, where it's sort of obvious where they're going with it the whole time, So I leave Unsolved Mysteries with a B+. It is very compelling. If you like the true crime stuff, I think this is a definitely a better way to go than some of the other shows. I almost gave it a B, but you know what? I was definitely intrigued by it. And it's only 6 episodes, so it's a short season. You can honestly, if you're into this, really binge it in a day, and there you go. So the other new show is also on Netflix. It's called Warrior Nun. It stars, mostly no names, but, up-and-coming people, I guess. Alba Baptisia, maybe, is the lead. She plays Ava Silva. And essentially she is, a teenager. She's 18 or 19, and she wakes up in a morgue and figures out, well, what's going on with my life? Where am I? She finds this, artifact in her back, and discovers she's now part of this ancient order, and is charged with fighting all these demons. So this was originally developed as a feature film, I think for Netflix, but they decided to actually reimagine it as a TV series instead. And I believe, is it based on something? Yeah, okay, so there's a comic book character called Warrior Nun. I thought I had read that. And it's a little bit in English, a little bit in Portuguese. It's probably maybe more than 50% English, but it's a lot of Portuguese as well. And she narrates it a lot in Portuguese as well. but this is her English language debut, so she's got a lot of history, I guess, with Portuguese, maybe film and television, both. I'm not sure, but that's why we've never really seen her, I guess, in America, because this is her first English language thing. I kind of like this. I mean, this is not. It's funny, like there's a whole host of these types of shows that I don't think I ever would have watched or paid attention to were I not doing this review show every week and really trying to seek out pretty much every new show that comes around. Like Motherland on Freeform is another one. It's not something that is necessarily up my alley. So much like the Game of Thrones ripoffs that we got a lot of like last fall, like Carnival Row and C with Jason Momoa, and there's a whole host of Game of Thrones ones earlier in the TV season, like last fall, but now we're getting a lot of these more like fantasy-driven, which Game of Thrones, of course, is fantasy too, but these are more like modern day, storytelling kind of things, but they all sort of have roots to like, centuries ago this happened, and so now in 2019, 2020, this is where we are, and here's you, and all of this. So there's a whole group of like those kinds of shows, and they're just ones I never would pay attention to. So it's interesting that I'm sort of getting an education in what makes a good one and what makes a bad one. And this one for me is not quite down the middle. I think it's a little more positive than that, but there's also a lot to maybe not necessarily like about it too. So I guess the good is that this actress is really good, and for her first English language part as well, I think she plays it really well. You definitely can feel her character's sort of confusion about what's going on, and also her willingness to fight and to find out what she needs to do to to make this happen. And I think she does a good job, and I think the premise is interesting too. I mean, I could see how this would be a very interesting comic book too. But that being said, I'm not sure how much of this is budgetary and how much of this is purposeful by design. But it's very bland. Now it's shot very darkly, very dimly lit because of they're in a convent, or they're in they're all in all these dark places. They're in the morgue, whatever. But even the set pieces aren't interesting. This show is not interesting to look at. And I think for a show like this, for a fantasy show, I think we need more than that. I just watched this, speaking of Netflix, it was #1 over the weekend, The Old Guard, which is the Charlize Theron movie that just came out, which I graded very highly. And that is, I mean, I don't want to say it's similar, but it takes place in the present day, but involves all these ancient things, and Charlize Theron's character is immortal, and it involves a new person being taught what's going on, and it was just so much more interesting to look at than this. This is not only dimly lit, but just boring set pieces, and that to me can help make or break something too, especially something of this nature where you expect it to be real flashy maybe. I mean, you hear that, Warrior Nun, you hear that title, and at least for me it's like, oh, okay, this is going to be cool. This chick is going to be badass. And she kind of is, but there's also not much going on around her to even really make that decision, But even though this is not something that I would personally stick with, I think it is better than some of the fantasy type things I've seen in the last few months. And she really is a good actress. I hope we see more of her in the future. And, there were a couple other good actors in here, but really, I mean, this is mostly her deal. This is her kind of front and center time in the spotlight. So I don't know. I mean, I will give them this. The opening scene is pretty badass. Like, it does capture your attention right away, and that is good. But I don't know. It seemed to me like maybe they could have made things other than her more interesting, I guess, So I'm going to leave Warrior Nun with a B-. So up next, we're going to talk about Cannonball. This is every week for the last, I don't know, 6 weeks maybe, we've had a new either game show or physical competition show to review. We've had, Don't on ABC and Game On CBS. And now we have Cannonball, which is on USA, although they did have a special, preview episode on NBC about a week ago. But now it's actually going to be, weekly on USA. That's its home. And essentially this is another, physical competition show. And when you think Cannonball, especially in the summertime, you think of a pool, you think of, jumping into a pool, and that's basically what this is. It's made to sort of look like an Olympic competition. They have all these crazy slides and all these crazy contests surrounded, by this enormous pool of water that people will be jumping into, diving into, what have you, being dropped into. And they have 3 people that are, I don't know, hosting it is the right thing, but there's 2 commentators, and then there's a person down on the field, talking to the contestants or whatever. So you've got Roski Diaz, I guess, and Mike something or other. They're sort of leading the charge. Mike Mizinen, I guess, and then Simon Gibson is the sort of guy out in the field talking to the contestants. This by far is the worst part of the show. So the competition part is, I think, kind of interesting. I mean, look, the problem with this show, with shows like this, I should say, is that it can get repetitive very quickly. It's my biggest problem with the Ultimate Tag show. Once you see people running around and playing tag, what else is there? And honestly, as I found out, not much. But here, they do have some interesting types of competitions, because there's different things they do with the contestants. And we also get to kind of meet the contestants one by one, and then as they dwindle down, we get a little more time with each one, a little background on them, and that kind of thing. So it's produced pretty well, and I would say of all the physical competition shows that are on right now, I mean, I really like Don't because of the Ryan Reynolds aspect, and I also like, the families that they choose for it are just kind of weirdos and kind of fun to sort of laugh at, I guess. But here, it's more about the production of it, I feel like, than the game itself, and that is what is detracting from it. Because the color commentators, I don't know, look, I get it. There's no sports on right now. People are hard up for stuff. But when you think about it, this stuff was all recorded before there was no sports. This stuff was all recorded before the shutdown. It would have to be, because there's groups of people all over the place in this show. So I don't know what they were really going for. I think they were trying to do some comedy bits with these commentators, and it just didn't work. And then same thing with the guy with the microphone talking to the contestants, like, hey, what'd you think of that crazy jump you did? And it's like, all right, because the problem is the stunts and the jumps and whatnot really only last about 30 seconds, maybe 40 if they're good. Like one of them is they're on this big ball. I don't know what it's made of, but maybe it's metal, but they have to try and hold on to it as it's shooting water out and whatever, and flailing about. So how long can you stay on? And, most of them last 20, 25, 30 seconds. So the bad part is, even though the competitions are interesting, they just are so quick, And so earlier on, before we really know the contestants too much, they kind of shoot them out at us, one by one they'll do, 5 in a matter of 2 or 3 minutes, and that's fun. But the commentators for this weigh me down. But it is pretty fun to watch. I'll give it that. So I will leave Cannonball with a B-. All right, so I told you I was going to kind of run through these. I don't usually do videos at my shore house here. So I want to get back to life, really. But I also want to spend a lot of time talking about the big binge for the week, which is Emergence. So this is a show that I graded very highly last fall. It was on one of my first shows after fall premiere week. because ABC ran it. It was one of their first shows that they put on for the fall, and I just loved it. I purposely didn't go back and look at my grade because I didn't want it to influence, me watching the whole thing. But I think it was either an A or an A minus. It was a very high grade, and it ended up in my top 10 shows of the year. And so if you're new to it, basically it takes place on Long Island, and there is a plane crash. I think it's a private jet actually, but there is this girl who survives, and it turns out she was never even on the plane at all. And Police Chief Joe Evans, played by Allison Tolman, who is newly divorced to the Donald Faison character, who is a constant in her life still, because they share a daughter together. And for a divorced couple, they're very, very amicable. So they decide to take this girl Piper in and find out, A, how she escaped unscathed from this accident, and B, what is her deal if she wasn't even on the plane. So there's a lot of questions going on here with this show. So right by the end of the first episode, this is like what hooked me after that pilot, we learn that something weird is definitely going on with this girl. And then okay, this is going to be a sci-fi show, this is going to be a mystery show. So to me, this is very much in the same vein as Lost. And I don't want to talk too much just about the pilot because I already reviewed the pilot. So now I want to kind of talk about the whole series. But as usual, I'm not going to do spoilers. We don't do spoilers here on the TV News and Reviews show. So I'm going to try to talk delicately about what's good and not good about this show. And I'll tell you right now, there's not much that is not good about it. So as we go on from episode to episode, we learn a lot more. The mystery unravels. But then, of course, as with shows like these, other mysteries rear their heads. So we're now having, 6 or 7 different things to keep up with, and different people to keep up with, and who's good and who's bad, who's doing what, and what is this girl, and who is this girl. And at the same time, you're also getting invested with the personal lives of Chief Evans and her father, who has cancer, and her daughter with Donald Faison, and then there a couple of their friends who are helping them. But you sort of in all shows like this, not everybody is what they seem, so that kind of unravels as well. And one thing about this is, if you're thinking about not taking it on because, okay, well, now it's been canceled and there's no season 2, and they thought they were going to get a season 2, so it's going to end on a cliffhanger like all of these shows do. And look, here's the deal. I actually stayed away from shows like this for a long time because of that. Because I kept getting invested in shows that just would get canceled after one season. Like Lost basically broke the mold on what TV shows can do. What weekly network television shows can do. There's no doubt about that. Lost broke the mold for that. And then, everybody was trying to replicate it for years and years. People are still trying to replicate it. NBC has Manifest, and, ABC tried again this year with Emergence. But the problem now is the binging. Everybody binges, so a show like this, people generally don't really get into, not because they might not see how they end, but they're like, well, if I'm going to invest in a show like this with so much intrigue and so much mystery, I'm just going to wait till the season's over and then just watch the whole thing. And that's fine, but because so many people do that, then it gets canceled, just like back in the old days when nobody was watching because they were afraid it would end on a cliffhanger. So what they did here is very, very smart. It's a little bit cliffhangery, but most of the major threads, in fact, I would say all of the major threads of the season get wrapped up in the final episode. And again, I'm not going to give you spoilers, so don't worry. But the last episode is actually a 2-parter. So it's 13 episodes, but part 1 and 2 of 12 and 13, they're basically, I don't know if they ran the same night or if they did run, a week apart. But it's basically like a 2-hour finale kind of thing, because it's basically one episode. But everything gets wrapped up in that, and then there's like a little thread sort of kicker thing at the very end that's like, okay, if this comes back for season 2, this is what we're going to dive into. You know, it's definitely less of a cliffhanger than like the season 1 ending of Lost where they found the hatch. And you're like, oh my god, what is this hatch? I have to wait 3 months for this. It's not anything like that. It's basically everything's kind of been resolved. I mean, as much as a show like this can resolve things. And then they sort of tear at a new thread that if they came back for season 2, you'd have it. So don't worry about that part going in. You know, I think, because my buddy Joe, who is a big sci-fi guy, he's been on my show a number of times. You know, he does some of the Disney reviews with me. But I told him, like, you really should see this. And he's like, nah, if it ends on a cliffhanger, I'm not down. It's akin to a movie that they're hoping will get a sequel, you know. And sometimes you just have to live with a little bit of a mystery ending, and then there is no sequel to that movie. You know, it's the same kind of thing. But first of all, Allison Tolman is outstanding. She won't get nominated for anything because they don't nominate shows like this. They never really have. You know, even Gillian Anderson didn't really get nominated for the X-Files and that kind of thing. But she's so great. And they've been looking for projects for her for a while. You know, she was on Fargo, the TV show. She was on another ABC one-season show called Downward Dog, which was a comedy. There's a couple of lighthearted elements to this, much like Lost, I guess. But, you know, the main part of this is certainly not comedy. But her and the whole cast, really. I mean, Donald Faison, look, I go back and forth on Scrubs. I liked it when it was first on and whatever. But then I kind of got sick of it and thought it was stupid. But I've always liked him. You know, he hosted a game show not long ago on Game Show Network, and that was fun. He's great here. I didn't know about his dramatic chops. I know they did a couple of dramatic things on Scrubs, but he's really good here, too. Her dad, who is played by... Let's see here. I feel like he is somebody famous, right? Clancy Brown. So, I don't really know the name, but he was in, he's been in a lot of things. Oh! Okay, he was in Lost. That makes sense. Boy, he looks way different now. He was in Lost. And speaking of Lost, Terry O'Quinn, who played John Locke, has an arc here on this show as well for like 3 or 4 episodes. Which, you know, even gives us more of a Lost vibe to it. He plays Richard Kindred, this billionaire dude. But the whole cast is so good. The young girl that plays Piper is named Alexa Swinton. And she is, you know, as far as I know, a new actress. But boy, she's really good at the whole, like, mysterious kid kind of thing. And it's not creepy kid. You know, a lot of these shows have the creepy kid component. They really buck a lot of the, you know, trends of these type of shows. Like, she is a really, you know, chill girl. She's a, you know, normal, seemingly normal little girl. And as we find out, it's not a spoiler, I don't think. But, like, as we find out, she doesn't even know these powers that she has that we sort of learn about in episodes 1 and 2. You know, she doesn't even know. So she's playing this girl who's a normal girl, but then the last half of the season, like, or maybe the last third of the season, you know, she plays almost a different character, but she's also got to still be the normal girl. Like, she's a really good actress. So all that works. And the other thing I really like about this that I think is rather unique to it, and there's only a few shows I can say this about of this variety, which is that they don't dumb anything down really, but it's also pretty easy to follow. It's not simple by any stretch of the imagination, but I feel like Lost was pretty good at that too. Like, Lost would unravel 3 or 4 or 5 different threads at a time, but I was never really confused watching Lost until we got to, like, you know, season 3 and 4 when everything just went kind of haywire. But, like, the first season, even the second season, even with everything going on and so, you know, Lost has way more characters than this has. I was still not really confused because the storytelling is so tight and is done in such a way that you don't have to really have your eyeballs glued and, like, writing clues down to follow the story. I think a lot of these shows, that's where they lose me, is that I don't know if the writers don't know what's going on, or maybe there's too many writers, so they don't, match up, and it varies from episode to episode. But this really felt like and maybe because I binged it and I don't usually binge, but it felt to me like just an extended movie. I mean, I think the most I watched in one sitting for this was 4 episodes. I watched the whole thing over the course of maybe 5 days. And I did not rewatch episode 1 actually, because it was so good that even though I watched it 9 or 10 months ago, I kind of remembered everything that happened. And plus they give you the recap, previously on Emergence, and so you're right there anyway. But yeah, I mean, well, the recaps help too, I guess, to remember what's happening in the story, whether you binge or not. But yeah, just the storytelling is so that it's not hard to follow, but it's far from simple storytelling, if that makes any sense. I don't know if it does, but yeah, so that's another positive. I mean, really, negative, I don't know. I mean, I will admit that there's a couple things that happen in the last maybe 3 or 4 episodes that deviate completely from the current story, and I'll just say they are more on the romantic, side of things. I don't think this show needed to have much of a romance portion, because there's already so much going on within family stuff. You've got her ex-husband, you've got her dad, you've got her daughter, you've got Piper, which they sort of take in as their daughter. You've got enough family things going on. I don't think they needed to go the romance angle with it. It's not a huge part of the story or the plot, but it was enough that I was just like, oh, don't go there, like, don't do this. But that was really, I mean, that's honestly probably the only negative I have. So all in all, debating, whether or not to leave this with an A or an A minus. Again, I don't remember what grade of those two I gave the pilot back in the fall, but I'm going to err on the side of this is a magnificent show, and if it's only a 1-season show, if nobody ends up picking it up for a second season, I would be hard-pressed to think of a better 1-season mystery, sci-fi, fantasy, drama like Lost, like Manifest, and like Blind Spot, like all of those shows, are in this vein. But the way it wrapped up, like, I feel like they sort of got the sense, okay, we're probably on the bubble here of whether or not we're going to come back. Let's wrap up as much as we can, So I really appreciate the way they wrapped everything up. So you know what? I am going to leave Manifest. Oh my goodness. I gave up on that show at episode 4. The acting is terrible. No, this one is Emergence, and I leave it with an A. It's... Of the 1-season shows I've seen in the last, 2 or 3 years, certainly of the drama or sci-fi variety, this is the best of them. Allison Tolman, she is a star in the making. She will find that project, and maybe it'll be a movie franchise. Maybe it'll be a movie project that, she finally finds her, A-list status or whatever. But if you haven't seen the Fargo TV show, she's great in that too. Downward Dog, I can't recommend. You can't really find it anywhere anyway, but I watched like 2 episodes of that and I didn't think it was very good. But, so maybe comedy isn't completely her angle. Maybe it is in this more mystery, sci-fi sort of wheelhouse, or, in terms of Fargo, mystery, drama, whatever. But yeah, this show is great. Strongly recommend it for sure. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for the show. I will say... First of all, there's a few episodes that I've already recorded that we'll be putting up while I'm down here at the beach. So this week, we are going to do a Dan Does Disney. I have one recorded with Tim for Treasure Island. There's a Food Fanatics that I did with Joe coming up. But also, Peacock goes up. The NBC app goes up, I think either tomorrow maybe or Friday, something. I think it is tomorrow, actually. So I will have a Peacock Is It Worth It at some point next week. I don't know how much TV I'm going to get to watch while I'm down here, at the beach. But I'll have a Peacock Is It Worth It show coming up. And I think even though usually when I do the Is It Worth It, it sort of takes place of it, replaces the news and reviews. I think I'm going to do news and reviews again next week too, because there's a bunch of new shows out there again, like the Zac Efron show. Again, Netflix has like 2 or 3 of them. And then CBS has a new competition show. There you go again. I always say every week in the summer there's a new competition show. So CBS has one that's getting great ratings. So I guess we'll sort of circle back around to a lot of that stuff, in addition to the Peacock Is It Worth It segment. So a lot to look forward to next week. But thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you back here next time. Bye.